Hi, my name is Nathaniel Frissell, W2NAF. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Scranton, lead principal investigator of the Personal Space Weather Station project, and leader and founder of the HamSCI community. Today, I'm going to talk about the HamSCI Personal Space Weather Station, architecture and current status. I'm very pleased to be here talking about this project at the 2020 virtual ARRL TAPR Digital Communications Conference. Without the collaboration from TAPR, none of this would be possible. As you can see, I have many co-authors on this project. In this presentation, I will give a high-level overview of the Personal Space Weather Station project. Throughout this year's DCC, you will hear from many of my co-authors who will be giving detailed updates on their respective parts of the project. The amateur radio hobby is truly amazing as it has so many facets, with just a few different ones shown on this slide. I personally have always had a tremendous fascination with the high frequency side of the hobby, as I'm sure many others listening to this presentation have as well. For me, one of the major driving factors of this fascination is not only HF radio's unique ability to propagate over the horizon and around the world, but also the variability associated with that propagation. We know that this variability is caused by changes in the ionosphere driven by a complex mix of forcing from space, forcing from the neutral atmosphere, and internal physical processes. In spite of more than a century of study, there is still a great deal that we do not know about radio propagation or the ionosphere. Although we have some understanding of the big picture, we do not understand the short-term, small spatial scale dynamics that affect our daily radio operations. All of this has helped to bring on the idea of the Personal Space Weather Station. It is actually Ward Silver, N0AX, who said after the 2017 Eclipse project that this should be HamSCI's next project. It is very exciting to be here today with TAPR and all of our collaborators who are working together to make this a reality. By working together with both the amateur radio and professional geospace science communities, it is my hope that this project will simultaneously help to advance our knowledge of the ionosphere and be useful to amateur radio operators around the world. As you can see in today's presentations, the PSWS is not something you can go out and buy today. Instead, this is a collaborative project that is being designed and developed right now. So what is a Personal Space Weather Station? The HamSCI Personal Space Weather Station, or PSWS, is a multi-instrument ground-based device designed to observe space weather effects both as a single point measurement and as part of a larger distributed network. It is personal because it is being designed such that an individual should be able to purchase one and operate it in their own backyard. For amateur radio operators, the Personal Space Weather Station should provide information about current radio propagation conditions both locally and as part of a global network. In addition, the Personal Space Weather Station design takes into account the needs of professional researchers who want to study specific aspects of the ionosphere and space weather. The Personal Space Weather Station is being developed as a collaborative project under the Ham Radio Science Citizen Investigation HamSCI Collective, which is led by the University of Scranton with collaborators at Case Western Reserve University, the New Jersey Institute of Technology, University of Alabama, the MIT Haystack Observatory, TAPR, and volunteers from additional universities and the amateur radio community. Before we get into the design and status of the Personal Space Weather Station, let's review some ways we can remote sense the ionosphere using amateur radio frequencies and show a few examples. So how are we able to remote sense the ionosphere using amateur radio frequencies? If the conditions are right, radio signals of a particular frequency will be refracted back to Earth by the ionosphere, the electrically charged layer of the atmosphere from about 60 to 1,000 kilometers altitude. This is most common in the medium and high frequency bands, which range from 0.3 to 30 megahertz. The red path in the ray trace diagram displayed here models the trans-ionospheric link on 14.03 megahertz between AA2MF transmitting in Florida and Whiskey Echo 9 Victor receiving 1,700 kilometers away in Wisconsin. The ray trace is computed using the FarLap ray tracing toolkit through a solar eclipsed version of the SAMI-3 first principles ionospheric model. The ionosphere will modulate the radio signal as it passes through, and these modulations can be used to remote sense the ionospheric state. It is useful to examine radio signals across a wide range of frequencies because the ionospheric effects on radio waves, including refraction and absorption, are frequently frequency dependent. Because of this, it is advantageous that we as amateur radio operators have a license to transmit on a large number of slice bands distributed throughout the radio spectrum, including those shown in the table on the right. Thanks to systems such as the Reverse Beacon Network, the Weak Signal Propagation Reporting Network, or WhisperNet, and the PSK Reporter, we already have real-time and archival radio propagation observations available to study. These networks are quasi-global, and the data archives now cover an entire solar cycle. Already, we have been able to use data from these systems in peer-reviewed scientific publications. The next few slides will include examples of this. As an example, the figure on the left shows observations and model results from the 2017 total solar eclipse, published in Geophysical Research Letters. The top figure shows 14 megahertz amateur radio reverse beacon network observations before, during, and after the eclipse. The bottom panel shows model results using far-lap ray tracing through the SAMI-3 solar eclipsed ionosphere. Both the observations and the model show the drop-off in 14 megahertz radio communications as a result of the eclipse-induced electron density depletion. The figure on the right also shows observations from the 2017 total solar eclipse. These are unpublished carrier frequency measurements of the 10 megahertz signal transmitted by WWV in Fort Collins, Colorado, and received by an amateur near Milwaukee, Wisconsin, using a receiver with a GNSS disciplined oscillator reference. From 14 to 16 universal time, positive excursions from the 10 megahertz are likely due to a shortening of the propagation path as atmospheric densities increase throughout the morning. Conversely, the negative excursions in the measured frequency are observed in the evening from 20 to 22 UT. Eclipse effects are observed between 16 and 20 UT, with negative excursions during eclipse onset and positive excursions as the eclipse ends. The sudden jump in observed frequency just before 18 UT is associated with a C-class X-ray solar flare observed by the GOES spacecraft. While we have been able to make great use of the RBN, WhisperNet, and PSK reporter data, we note that these systems were not necessarily designed with the goals of generating scientific-grade observations. Therefore, reports from these systems may have limited timestamp accuracy, frequency stability, and flexibility for designing special observation modes. Therefore, and furthermore, frequency measurements like the ones shown here are often difficult to make and are not automated. This is where the Personal Space Weather Station project is working to address these issues. The Personal Space Weather Station will also incorporate instruments such as a ground magnetometer and GPS GNSS receiver that will enable a more complete set of ground-based geospace environment measurements. So what makes up a Personal Space Weather Station? At the heart of the Personal Space Weather Station is a software-defined radio receiver with frequency coverage from about 100 kilohertz to 60 megahertz. The frequency range was chosen because signals in the medium and high frequency bands from 300 kilohertz to 30 megahertz are particularly sensitive to variations of the ionospheric state. This receiver will be able to listen for signals of opportunity and transmissions made specifically for coordinated experiments. The primary output of the software-defined radio will be raw in-phase quadrature IQ samples, which can then be derived into a variety of data products. This includes snapshots of the entire high-frequency radio spectrum, Doppler shift measurements of signals received from standard stations such as WWV and CHU, oblique ionograms from ionosonts of opportunity, decodes of digital amateur radio signals including FT8, the weak signal propagation reporter whisper mode, and Morse code, which can be sent to the reverse beacon network. These SDR observations can also be used to measure high-frequency band noise and detect lightning signatures. A dual-frequency global navigation satellite system, or GNSS receiver chip, will be used to serve as a highly stable frequency reference, provide precision timestamping with 10 to 100 nanosecond accuracy, and provide total electron content TEC measurements. A magneto-inductive ground magnetometer will provide 3-axis magnetic field measurements at a 1-second cadence with approximately 10 nanosecond resolution. A local computer will coordinate operation of all attached instruments, handle local data reduction, provide a local user interface or display, and send data back to a central database and receive commands and updates from the central control system. This system is modular, so instruments can be added or removed as needed. For instance, high-latitude users may want to add an auroral camera. To help maximize adoption, Two versions of the personal space weather station are being developed, a highly flexible software-defined radio-based version and a more focused low-cost version. The software-defined radio-based version has the features that were already described, a synchronized dual-channel 0.1 to 60 MHz FPGA-based direct sampling software-defined radio, cross-polarized wideband receive antennas, and a dual-channel GNSS module for precision timestamping, frequency reference, and total electron content measurements. A more powerful single-board computer such as the Odroid N2 will be selected as the computer. The SDR in this version is known as the Tangerine SDR and is being developed by TAPR. The target cost of this system is about US $500. The low-cost version of the personal space weather station is being developed by the Case Western Reserve University and the Case Amateur Radio Club, W8EDU. The radio in this system is known as the Grape and has a target cost of about US $100. The Grape radio has a single channel and antenna and can measure high-frequency variations of received signals such as those from high-frequency standard stations, including WWV in Fort Collins, Colorado, and CHU in Ottawa, Canada. A single-frequency GNSS discipline oscillator is used as a frequency standard and for precision timestamping. An inexpensive Raspberry Pi will serve as the computer. Both versions of the personal space weather station will use the same hardware for the ground magnetometer. Additionally, the software-defined radio-based version will have a mode to emulate the low-cost version to allow uniform data collection across the maximum number of nodes for specified campaigns. The Personal Space Weather Station project is highly collaborative with multiple institutions, organizations, and volunteers participating. This project falls under the HamSCI Collective and receives funding from the National Science Foundation. The University of Scranton is the lead institution for both the HamSCI and the Personal Space Weather Station and is responsible for overall project integration in radio science. TAPR and Zephyr Engineering Incorporated are responsible for the Tangerine SDR engine, RF module, clock module, and magnetometer engineering. Case Western Reserve University and the Case Amateur Radio Club, W8EDU, lead the development of the low-cost personal space weather station. The New Jersey Institute of Technology is providing scientific oversight of the ground magnetometer. The University of Alabama is responsible for this system software and database design, and MIT Haystack Observatory is serving as a science collaborator. In addition, the open nature of the development process has allowed many other institutions and people to collaborate and contribute. So here's the current engineering status of each of the different teams. As you can see, we are moving along in the design phase and we are approaching prototype creation. And this is true for the Tangerine data engine, RF module, and clock module. Same thing with the Magneto Pi Hat. And for, we do have some prototype versions of the magnetometer out already in collecting data. There's also the low-cost version. There are some generation 1 prototypes currently deployed, and the case group is engineering generation 2 right now. The control software and database currently runs on an Odroid N2 single board computer, and it uses data from a Tangerine SDR simulator, which consists of a flex radio with GPSDO and IQ output and can monitor up to 16 band segments at a time. So we are definitely moving along with the engineering of this project and hope to have even more prototypes and hope to really have prototypes soon. So in summary, HamSCI is a collective that aims to bring together the amateur radio and professional space science research communities for mutual benefit. In an effort to improve the scientific usability of amateur radio observations and aid in amateur radio communications, HamSCI is developing this personal space weather station designed with science requirements in mind from the very beginning. And these modular systems will include HF radio receivers for studying the ionosphere using signals of opportunity, ground magnetometer with approximately 10 nanotesla resolution, GNSS receivers for precision timestamping and frequency stability, at a target price between about $100 to $1,000 depending on capabilities. So finally, I would like to acknowledge the support from the National Science Foundation, the amateur radio community, my science and engineering collaborators, and the many other people who have helped to make this project possible. Thank you very much and enjoy the DCC. All right, well, thank you very much. I don't see any questions in the Zoom chat right now. But I guess one comment I want to make, because there's not a lot of time for questions. That presentation is supposed to be an overview talk basically for many of the presentations you're going to see today and tomorrow. So all of the presentations up until about 2:30 today are in support of this HamSCI Personal Space Weather Station project. And some of the ones tomorrow too are related as well. So I just hope that presentation kind of puts everything else into perspective. And throughout today, we'll learn more about both the engineering and the science projects that people have been working on connected to this larger personal space weather station project.
Yeah, Nathaniel, we have a question from the YouTube user. They
Sure.
want to know if the Odroid is running Linux, and is there some preliminary support for streaming IQ to or from a Flex radio?
Yes, I believe the answer to both of those questions is yes. And that will be in Bill Engelke's talk. The Odroid is running Linux. He has a mock-up of the data engine, and that mock-up is actually being fed by his Flex radio. So he actually has it implemented right now.
And we have another question of when can I get one, which is coming later.
That's right, that's coming later. And that was one of the points I tried to make in my presentation right now too, is, this is something we're actively developing. So we're hoping to see some prototypes of the Tangerine later this year. But I think you'll be talking about that more in your presentation, right, Scotty?
Yes, I will. And another question is there a way for me to contribute to the project, and how can I get one?
So I think Christina will be talking about some ways that you can, well, I guess it also depends what you would like to do to contribute to the project. Right now, the best way to contribute to the project is to join into the Tangerine SDR telecons on Monday nights, and that information is available at tangerinesdr.com, or to go to hamsci.org and click the Get Involved tab. You can find out about our telecons there, and you can find out about the join our listservs as well. And that way you can become part of the development process, and then you'll know exactly when things are going to be available and what the status is.
Nathaniel, there was a question from the chat on more details from Kenya, more details on the magnetometer.
Great, so that's going to be in Dave Witten's and Scotty's, Dave Witten and Hyomin's talk later today. That will be at, I think that one's at 2:30, 2 p.m. Eastern, I think. To double check the schedule here. But we do have, for that one, we do have some prototypes or, early beta test units that are collecting data right now. They'll be able to show what some of that data looks like. And Scotty has been working to do the CAD layouts for that unit as well. So I think we're getting closer to going to do a prototype production run, making somewhere between 25 to 50 units just for testing.
I think it's 3 p.m. Nathaniel for that presentation, Eastern Daylight Time.
Great, 3 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time is the magnetometer presentation. Thank you very much, George.
And another question, Nathaniel, are the low-cost prototypes deployed going to send data to a central database?
Yes, they will. So the low cost, the low cost personal space weather stations will send it to a central database. It will go to the same central database that the regular Tangerine SDR1 will as well. Will the prototypes do that? That's still in development, but that is where things are going to go. Everything will be sending data to a central database.
Okay, and question Christina answered in the text, but the question was, will the control software be available standalone for folks who want to use a radio like a IC7300?
I don't know that we will be able to provide that directly from our team, but this is something where, as a collaborative open source project, it's something that we could get a volunteer, or if someone wants to volunteer to help implement that. I think we would welcome that. The system that we are developing right now, I think there's going to be basically the control software is for the local system is going to be divided into two parts. One part's going to, talk to the radio, and the other part's going to talk to the central database. And so if you take the radio portion, that should be able to be modified, and we'll make the API available so that if someone wants to modify it and make the existing radio system work with that, they would be welcome to do so.
And one more question.
Last question. We need to start Steve's.
Okay. Is there an estimate on how many stations worldwide are needed to get good and overall data? And as an aside to that, you talk about signals of opportunity. Will there be use of signals specifically transmitted to do a study rather than just signals of opportunity?
Those are both great questions. The answer to the first question, how many stations do you need? It really depends on what you're looking at. So there are some things where you could probably get away with 1 or 2 stations, and if you have good quality data, you can do something interesting. And we'll see examples of that in Steve Serwin's talk next, where he's just using a single station. At the same time, if you're looking at things that are more on a global scale, we're going to want as many stations as possible. So no matter if there's 1 station out there or if there's 5 million stations, we should be able to do interesting science. And what was the second question?
Whether there's going to be you're going to be using only signals of opportunity, or whether there's going to be specific signals that you will be able to use to analyze the data.
I hope that we'll be able to use specific signals in the future as well. But right now we're starting out with the signals of opportunity. But this is also a great way for, say, like the frequency measurement test community to collaborate. They could put up a beacon, or we can even, get an experimental license possibly, or coordinate with specific ionosons or super darn radars. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for doing coordinated campaigns as well.
Thank you, Nathaniel. And now on to Steve Serwin, WA5FRF.